President Biden stumbled while getting back on Air Force One after a trip he took yesterday to Selma, Alabama, to commemorate the 58th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. This wasn't the first time he fell while trotting up the plane's steps. Just last month, he tripped up the Air Force One steps when boarding to leave Poland. And in March of 2021, he seemed to lose his balance, too, this time at Air Force Andrews Air Base.
It's unclear what caused Biden to stumble multiple times, might raise some alarm for people calling into question whether the 80-year-old is fully fit to serve another term as president, according to an Associated Press report. He's got to hold the handrails. He's not holding the handrails in some of those. You got to hold the handrails.
Sure. I mean, obviously the implication is that he's not fit to govern because he can't walk up the stairs. So
I trip on stairs all the time.
A couple things. Obama stumbled up the steps. I don't know if there's been a president, regardless of age, who hasn't tripped up the steps. And part of me is frustrated by this discourse because I'm much more concerned about what Biden says, what he thinks, and his policy positions and decision making than I am about even his physical robustness.
Right.
At the end of the day, I don't care if he's confined to, bed rest or wheelchair or anything like that.
We've had presidents in the past
who were. Of course. And so that I just feel like that's the wrong metric to be assessing his fitness. Now, substantively,
his mental acuity, though, is a little bit different based on the way he presents himself, the way he says things, where he appears to forget things or choose the wrong words. And now maybe that's just the way Joe Biden is. It's not reflecting any sort of cognitive decline, but that's, I think, a more serious question.
Yes, and even outside of changes in his synaptic firing that may be the result of age or whatnot, his political choices and decision-making have been questionable his entire life. I mean, there's substantive disagreements to be had about the man. He is, frankly, on many policy metrics to the right of many people in the country. We just had this whole discourse around Social Security where in this moment he is defending it and I think did a great job at the State of the Union putting Republicans in a position of also having to defend Social Security when they objected to his characterization of them of having tried to cut it in the past. They booed that and he said, okay, great. Well, then I guess you agree with me. We're all going to protect Social Security. That's great. It is also true that he is someone who has led the charge against for trying to cut Social Security. He said that Social Security cuts are on the table for the majority of his career. So, I mean, it just feels a little bit like a misdirection to have to talk about these kinds of things when the issues that are germane to the interests and positive economic outcomes from the American people are separate and apart from whether or not he can make it up a staircase.
Sure. I don't want to draw too many conclusions for this or make it into a bigger deal than it is. I mean, it is a reminder that he's an older American. We should respect the elderly. They're entitled to comfort and rest in their old years. We happen to be having a lot of very old people in key positions in government right now in a historically unprecedented way that is itself a little bit worrying to me. Also in the way that they kind of cling to power. I mean, some are in, like Dianne Feinstein finally retiring. Chuck Grassley is ancient. The average age of the members of Congress has gone way up. A lot of them just choose not to retire because they don't face enough competition or pressure to do so in a way that I think can be unhealthy for our democracy. It's not necessarily healthy for them. Maybe it's healthy for, in some cases, how much money they make.
Sure, because I was going to say they're all disproportionately old and they're also disproportionately incredibly affluent in Congress.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, I think the latter part is the bigger problem, but they're related. How is it that someone in Congress for 20 years on a $170,000 salary is able to amass millions of dollars in wealth? And that's not wealth they had coming in. The gap between what Nancy Pelosi was worth 30 years ago versus now, that's the fundamental problem. Yeah. It's worth noting that, Biden's only challenger so far in the Democratic primary was recently asked about his age and whether or not that was something that was motivating her to run for president. And of course, Marianne Williamson in this recent interview was very adamant that that was not a line of attack that she was planning to take. Let's take a look at that.
Do you think Biden is too old to run for re-election?
No, I'm not going there. I don't think ageism has any place in our in our thinking.
So what do you make of that? Is that a smart strategy for Marianne to not want to hit him on his age?
Well, I don't know if it's a smart strategy or not. I think we asked her about that yesterday. She was interviewed on Rising by me and Batya, and she very much didn't want to go that route, which is respectful. She's a very respectful person. She wants to engage on ideas, which I think that's a fine choice. So
Yeah,
I can understand not wanting to go there, even though it probably is a good way to attack it.
At the end of the day, I think that she's probably conscious of the fact that Democrats have painted anyone who criticizes Biden's age as bad faith, mean, low base, beneath political notice. And as someone who's already getting that treatment for the press because of the substance of her ideas, it's a bit of a thorny patch for her to engage with, even if it's legitimate. So, I mean, I understand strategically why she would want to stay away from it. I mean, look at what happened to even Democratic insiders like Julian Castro and Cory Booker when during the 2019-2020 primary season, they made some pretty obvious statements about Joe Biden's debate performance, his failure to remember things that had just been said. And that was basically the last time we've seen them in the context of the primary or since.
Well, First Lady Jill Biden scoffed at suggestions that the president should take a cognitive test, labeling Nikki Haley's proposed testing for politicians over 75 years of age ridiculous and saying, quote, I mean, we haven't even discussed, we would never even discuss something like that. A comment from a Pastor Prime sort of political figure.
LOL.
So I will never stop saying that again. I don't mean that. I'm making fun of Don Lemon, to be clear.
Well, look, I think I do agree with Jill Biden here. The idea that you should need to cognitive test people after 75, if you're going to cognitive test people, cognitive test them at any age.
The cognitive test is the election. Like if you get more votes than the other person, you won the cognitive test. I mean, what else are we going to do? No, the cognitive test idea is a kind of trying to expert and science this.
Yeah.
These are political questions, not the experts can't decide whether Biden should be the president. Only the American people can do that.
Right.
Some of us would say that some of his policies reflect cognitive decline, but we would have said that about him at any age. And say that's essentially what you just said earlier in the segment.
Also, the ways it could be weaponized. I mean, any conservative who might think that that's a good idea should reflect on Ronald Reagan. And Democrats who think that might be a good idea should reflect on John Fetterman. I mean, there's a lot going on here. And again, I think you're right. It's a political decision. And if the voters want to vote these people in, they can live with the consequences of that.
The cognitive test is the scoreboard. All right, more Rising right after this.